So first of all, to give you a little bit of a run through my career, I started my career back in Germany in 2004 as a management trainee for the German Merck KGaA, where I went through a number of the different finance departments. Then later I got appointed as the regional financial analyst for our generics business unit based in the UK. In 2007, then, this generics business unit was sold off to the American Mylan. And as part of this integration of both entities, I relocated to Lyon in France, where I became the right hand of our regional president as a project coordinator and subsequently senior controller of our French affiliate. And in 2010, then the SAP Business Project Manager for the management of a regional SAP harmonization project. And after this, in 2012, I got appointed finance director for our Belgian affiliate and relocated to Brussels in Belgium, where I still stayed for roughly 2.5 years. And then as part of a private decision to migrate to Australia, I came to Perth, where I am now since Christmas 2014. And so in terms of the key learnings, I would like to split it first of all into the essentials which you have when you start your career as a graduate, the basics that you need to actually shine in your work and to be considered for a promotion. And then secondly, I want to talk about the key skills from how I see what is key if you're becoming a leader. And that's not only restricted to becoming a leader in terms of CFO or finance director, but also key traits which are important when you are a middle manager or a departmental manager. And afterwards, during the Q&A session, I can probably talk a little bit as well about the potential roadblocks that you may face along your career journey. And there are a number of those which I experienced myself, and I would be very happy to share with you how I overcame them and which helped me in my career. So first of all, for the early years, which is obviously very basic and a no-brainer, the things that you need to have are that you are mastering your basics. That means you need to have the right qualifications to succeed within finance. For me in Germany, that meant it's a diploma in business administration. But for instance, in the English-speaking world, so in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, that means as well your CPA designation or CA designation. And actually, one thing which I found for myself, because that's something which is not so common within the German-speaking countries, the CPA designation is really essential to find a good job. And I personally started my CPA only with the decision to relocate to Australia. So at the moment, I'm still studying the last 3 segments of the CPA. And this is a hurdle which I find just getting through the first stage of getting filtered out by recruiters or HR departments. So my first recommendation to you is if you're planning to relocate to Australia or another English-speaking country, then definitely make sure you have your CPA in place before you head out. The next element, obviously, is once you have your specialized skills and you start working, and that's very key, and these are the next couple of points because they're so essential and they help me so much, is you have to broaden your experience. That means, first of all, you need to understand the bigger picture, meaning you need to understand how the entire department functions and how the entire organization functions. That obviously is different based on which company you're working in, whether it's a big one or a small one. And for me, as a management trainee, it was very easy to go from department to department and find out what are their internal processes. But even if you're not in such a structured management trainee program, what you can always do is speak to colleagues within your department and from other departments, organize lunchtime or coffee break meetings and find out what is their motivation, how are they working, what is their input or output which is related to your department, and what are the key pain points that need to be addressed, or maybe even positive sides which they like about your department. One step further is then to broaden your horizon, and that for me actually means that you participate in any project that is brought to you, especially if it's a cross-functional project where you're exposed to different departments. For myself, that meant very early in the career, I worked on a carbon emission program project, later on ERP implementations, on merger and acquisition integration projects, IT projects, and so on and so forth. So everything which gives you an interaction with different departments up and beyond what you would do in your daily work life. And the next level to that would be to be open as well to completely leave your comfort zone, like I did in my career. And to be honest, even though it was never the right time, it was always the right decision to do it. That is pack up everything, and I followed my company, as I mentioned before, from Germany to the UK, then to France, then to Belgium, and now privately to Australia. This leaving your comfort zone, learning something new, being sometimes out of your depth, really adds something to your mind, because when you're new in a job, you're very flexible, very open to the new things. But once you get into the daily repetitive work life, then those things can easily get lost. And so by exposing yourself to new and unfamiliar situations, your brain remains very activated. And obviously, once you become a finance director or a CFO of a company, you will always be exposed to things which not necessarily always have something straight to do with your day-to-day job. And it's your key skill and your key task to deal with those unfamiliar situations. So the more your training you get early on, the better it is. And obviously, the positive side effect of all those points which I just mentioned as well is that you build a network across your company or even across your industry. And also it means that people get to know you and you build a reputation across the organization. The next point is definitely you have to find your passion. You have to find out what personally you're good at. And there's no good or bad answer around that. But that could be, for instance, tax dealings, balance sheet items, managing teams, or whatever. For me, it means one of my passions is definitely change management. And the second one is dealing with intercultural teams. These are things which I obviously picked up along the way through all the changes I went through myself and through the international assignments. And this is something which helps me a lot now in my career, and it helps me a lot to actually show a profile and basically what my signature is and what sets me apart from the rest of the people. And that's something which is key. And I think everybody, not only in finance, should know exactly what their passion is about. And lastly, in those early years, what is very important is that you're results driven, meaning it doesn't matter how many hours you put into your job, it depends on what is the outcome. And one other learning which I had very early in my career was already that whatever problem you come across, that you think for yourself before you escalate it to your manager in terms of what is a potential solution that you could give to that one. Not only it trains your brain in terms of always seeing a solution with every problem that is out there, but also you build a reputation, obviously, with your manager as being a very proactive employee, concerned about the best for the company, and it gives you yourself the feedback from somebody else, whether your thinking is correct or whether you oversee some of those assumptions. And this is for me the key skills and key learnings which I had very early in my career. So during my first roles in the UK and in Germany. And I see that already there are the first few questions coming in. And if that's fine with you, I would first continue with the second part of the presentation, and then we will get to the questions. But feel free to type in your questions already now, and then we'll go through them one by one. The second point is then when you're asked to step up to becoming a leader, so you become a manager and later a finance director or a CFO of a company. The key thing is, first of all, that you find out for yourself whether that's the right thing for you, whether you want to do it, because you have to step up and become a leader. And I've seen too often people who have been excellent experts in their field, and that's the reason why they got promoted and why they accepted the promotion, but in the end they were deeply unhappy because they couldn't make this mental switch to becoming a manager. What does it mean to become a manager? In my opinion, it means first of all you have to let go of the details, because afterwards you have a team dealing with those details for you. And it means as well that you have to focus a lot about people management. So what I realized once I became a manager, actually the share of where I had to add expertise myself decreased significantly. And the part which was really important became more dealing with the people, with the motivations, how to work with them, and how to make your team function together, which was easy for me in a way, because the first job I got appointed to as a manager was the SAP Business Project Manager role, which was an area where I was completely technically out of my depth. So I had no risk of actually becoming a micromanager in that area. And I had to find the right balance between control and trust, and getting constant communication and feedback with the experts in the organization. And that actually helped me a lot to find the right balance. And I maintained this as well during my role as finance director, where when I came in, I engaged with all the different departments and my team members to find out what are their pain points, what are the breaks in processes, and what are their frustrations, and then try to help them without going too much into detail of all the subject matters. Obviously, for control purposes, you need to maintain a detailed understanding for the finance part of things. And one definite recommendation would be is to get a general management skills training, which is something that I received myself, and most companies should be able to offer it to you, because this gives you the basic of how to deal with difficult colleagues, how to take up topics with HR, how to motivate people, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, and that I think there is enough literature out there from various sources, is the first 90 days. That's definitely a key thing, because you need to gain traction and support within the organization. And from myself, when I got appointed finance director, I took that very seriously, and I spent extensive time with my two managers. I had a dual report to the local general manager and to the regional CFO. So I spent extensive time with them to get their input of what is going well in the department or where there is improvement or change needed. And I did the same thing together with my local finance team and also with the other departments. And then I wrote up a detailed 90-day transition plan, which I reviewed with my managers and agreed upon. So I had a written document based on which during the first 3 months I could really track my progress and make sure that I gain traction within the organization. And what helped me around that was as well that to gain the support of my team to follow me on this journey of change, is that I picked a couple of very low-hanging fruits, you would say, or easy nuisances they had to deal with. For instance, emails that they sent to the headquarters which hadn't been answered for a certain amount of time, or open questions with other departments that needed to be resolved, or complaints about simple things which are not working well in the department. And I picked those ones up and I brought results to my team on those ones. And that actually helped a lot to make my team understand that I had a genuine interest in supporting them and helping them in advancing within the organization and bringing the finance department forward. And then I easily got their support for the rest of the journey for my 90 days plan. And with that said, I would like to maybe open up now for the first set of questions that we have received so far. And I see there is a first question, and I would like to hand over the word to Susan with her first question so that she can answer it herself. So Susan Gunn I will unmute you now, and then you can ask the question directly to the audience to make it a little bit more interactive. Can you hear me, Susan?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I just wanted to know, I have been a CFO before, and I'm looking to maybe go back as a CFO. I'm just finishing my qualifications as well. I'm currently on a board. I'm also on the audit committee for probably 4 years for a local council, and also treasurer of a Rotary Club, and also on their board as well. So does that help for, is that helpful for someone, that want to actually re-enter the workforce and become a CFO in the future?
I would say that definitely something like that should help. It depends obviously on how big the organization is. To be honest, I myself have not been on any board or audit committee yet, because I was a CFO as part of a bigger American group. But for smaller organization where you as a local CFO would have direct contact with the board and the audit committee, it definitely helps if you have experience from both sides. So I would definitely see that as a very good plus in terms of increasing your chances in finding a new employment in that area.
Yeah, the organisations, the local councils like $20 million, it's not small.
Exactly.
And the Rotary Club, the one that I'm in has just started 4 years ago, but it's one of the growing ones, because most Rotary Clubs are dying. Our one's the opposite, it's growing.
Yeah.
So I'm helping them to, put in internal controls and procedures.
Yeah, I would definitely put those experiences forward, because it shows that you've been on different sides, and that's a little bit what I wanted to get on in the first part of my brief presentation. Is the more experiences you have which go beyond what you actually want to do as a role is better, and it's important, because as a finance director you're not actually only responsible for finance but for the well-being of the entire organization. So those interactions and first-hand experiences actually are a great thing for you to move ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So then I hand over to Neha for the next question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So
What do you do when your work does not get like proper recognition, and where you're working in spite of the fact that you have been working hard, but still there are a lot of political kind of things going on in office, and somehow you believe in the hard work to get up, and it doesn't get recognized that way. Then what do you do?
yeah, so actually that's a very good question, because that's one of the points which I highlighted under the potential roadblock section, and actually I've been there myself. That's what I mean, being left in a corner. Especially when you do a good work, in my opinion, there is a risk, depending on your direct managers, that obviously they have no real interest in see you progress in your career, leave their department, and probably leave a big gap for them. So
Yes.
not getting recognized is a true risk. And what really helped me there, and my experience was during the period where I was the senior controller for our French entity, where I suddenly didn't have more exposure to the regional management team. And I was sitting in an office, and I was 2 levels away from the CFO level. So my exposure beyond the department would always have been filtered. And I saw myself a true risk that I could have actually stayed in that role, being forgotten until I retire. And so what helps for that one as well is, once again, to get back to what I said for the early years, is build an extensive network within the organization. And as I said, try to promote yourself or put yourself on every inter-functional project that you can, so that people know you regardless of what your manager wants to be noticed or not noticed. And that you can do, first of all, by promoting yourself during coffee or lunchtime meetings that you have. And obviously, it means as well speaking to the colleagues, whether it's socially or directly within a project setting, in terms of showing your aspirations to move on and do something. A lot what I find within the organization is as well self-marketing, so that people actually notice the good work that you're doing, and that your good work doesn't get absorbed by somebody else or just gets lost within the blur of the general company noise. So all the connections you have outside your department are essential to help you protect from your work not being recognized.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions at this stage? Good. So then if you have other questions, feel free to ask them. Yes, I have another question from Susan. Yes, you're...
I'm actually now living in Perth, like yourself. I came out from New Zealand, and I found in my younger years, I had the same problem as what the lady was talking about. Recognition. In those days, this is quite a while ago. It was always, male were more sort of dominant, and so being still in some organisations still the same. How can a woman break into a male, accounting and finance, especially in Perth, is still a male dominant area? How can a woman try to break into a sort of monopoly, apart from the office politics? I've had, male managers, and some of them are bad, some of them are good, they like to control, put the control and won't let you learn or go further. How, what do you do as a woman to try, apart from the networking or leaving the organisation?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, an interesting question, because I recently read about exactly specific that point related to Perth, that in Perth that seems to be a bigger problem than in the other Australian cities. So it's an interesting point that you bring that up. Actually, obviously, I'm male, so that's something which I haven't experienced myself so far.
That's right.
What I know, nevertheless, from my networking is that I have in my network a couple of very successful women who overcame that. And if you like, after this call, I can maybe try and put you in contact with them, because there are support networks about what you can do as a woman to really overcome those hurdles. And definitely in the end, wherever you are in an organization, especially in a political organization, that's a little bit the environment and the reality I have to deal with. And as you say, there are good managers and there are bad managers. And you need to try and get the support of the good managers to put you ahead. And obviously, if the political resistance is too bad, I'm afraid that probably the only option that you have is switch to a different organization. And that's what you sometimes see, that those organizations which are a little bit too stubborn and don't see the potential of women in business or the diversity itself, that they lose good employees to organizations which do recognize that. So there's only so much you can fight against it. And I would definitely support someone like you in fighting that one. And if you have good managers in the organization, maybe they will be on your side. Maybe try to have a one-to-one discussion with them to see what you can do to overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, I found like, I was a CFO before for a financial distress company, and the managing director, everyone, men and women, knew he was a very difficult person to work for. But because at that time the organisation was going into receivership, and they needed someone who could actually turn the organisation around. He needed me, so he was very good to me, which is opposite to men and women that's actually worked for him, you know, over the 50 years or so. It was an old family organisation, and it's been around for 59 years, and they needed someone to actually be able to help the organisation turn itself around, and that's what I did. I came in within 1 year and managed to turn the organisation around, and you know, and he was really, you know, he was support the males that I worked for, all seniors, they're all times 2 my age. They were really supportive in terms of my decision making and things like that. So that was, you know, it was a hard organisation, but I was the only woman in terms of
that's a good point. That means for yourself, you have found the right way to break through that. And then if you have the support of your superior colleagues, that's something which should definitely weigh a lot within Perth. So if you have still contact with them and if they're still supportive of you, then probably for you personally, you should have resolved the problem, because they can speak for you and speak through this kind of glass ceiling that you would face maybe here in Perth.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. So there's another question from Niha. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I have experienced certain things in the past when I was working with this particular manager of mine, that he used to make me all the work done, and when it came to presentation, he used to take all the credit in the public meetings, you know, in terms of when it used to come to present to the directors or something. I mean, you know, he used to kind of get a hold on what I have done already, and he used to claim it under his name. So, well, beyond the point, I gave up and I moved to another organization. But what do you think could have been the best way for me to claim that it is my work?
Yeah, that depends a little bit on the organization where you work in and how this manager of yours is perceived. Obviously, you always have the possibility, theoretically, especially if you plan to move on anyway, is to address the point directly with your manager. Maybe the manager is open to something like that in a one-to-one discussion as well, but it depends on the personality. That might not work. Obviously, a very confrontational way would be to just shout it out during a meeting and say, by the way, I did the actual work to that one. But that could take the relation to a point where you have no other option than leaving. And then as a little bit more kind of, how do you call it, politically correct way, what you could do is, while you prepare work for your manager, that you talk to people outside your organization or link to the department who will receive the work, that you mention how hard you work in preparing this presentation or whatever. Let's say you have to prepare a presentation for your manager, and then there's nothing preventing you that when you meet someone from the other department over a coffee, that you mention that you've been already spending 2 days putting the presentation together, and it's very difficult to find the right words to put in there, or the layout or something like that. Just something which in an informal setting basically gives the information that you are the one doing the work behind it.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then we have the next question from N. Anne, can you hear me? Anne Höhn? Can you hear me? I have a question. Good. Then I will read out the question to everyone. As a migrant with solid work experience in your country but lack of Australian experience, how could you overcome this when the recruiter asks you? That's actually a very good question, and I read about that before coming out to Australia, and I experience it myself at the moment as well. When people look at my CV and at my experience, they are always very overwhelmed by what I've done already and what I've experienced so far. But whenever it comes to a specific position, what I hear is, well, our client has requested somebody who has Australian experience, or they have burned their finger with migrants who came to Australia and didn't really perform. So actually, that's definitely a hurdle which I experience at the moment myself. And it's a little bit difficult to overcome it. I think in Australia you have a little bit a fear of the people who are from the outside, maybe because you don't have all the background of known referrals that they would have had you already worked in Perth themselves, where people are very close together and know each other. So for me, and to be honest, I haven't overcome this hurdle yet. I'm still looking for my first employment in Australia. But the approach which I've chosen right now is that I build a reputation within Perth myself through extensive networking, and also by putting some work examples out there through my blogs on LinkedIn. And I invite every one of you to connect with me on LinkedIn and read through the blogs of what I found in terms of networking and self-marketing and giving proof of your skills beyond what you can show in a CV, and to hopefully overcome this perception that Australia is that different. Because I would definitely agree with you that in terms of especially finance role, the legislation and the recording under IFRS in Australia is only minimally different from the recording and the reporting of IFRS in Europe. So I think that's more a perception or a fear that you have to deal with when coming to Australia, and overcoming it is the most difficult thing. And for that, you need friends and network or people who are willing to try you out. I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to ask a follow-up question. Then we have another question from Susan. I put you on speaker again. Yes, Susan?
Thomas, I'm also an academic, so I'll tell you a funny story. I came here in, 2008, and I've been teaching in New Zealand, accounting, believe it or not. Yeah. I've since then haven't had any difficulties in getting tutoring work at the university. I now tutor at Murdoch at third year level, had no problems with that. The only problems I have when I wanted to go back into like leadership or accounting, corporate accounting roles, that's with a stigma, and that's why I took on doing voluntary work, because the board work I'm doing is actually voluntary, not paid. And I found that my skills I had in New Zealand were no different on the board, on the audit committee, and now I'm the treasurer at the Rotary Club. It was no different. So it's, here in Perth, it's more the networking. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and that's probably the big difference between Perth and the East. There's a big difference between Sydney, Melbourne. Sydney, Melbourne's more multicultural.
Yeah.
And then we'll accept people from different nationality if you can find an organisation. But here in Perth, it's more because many people that are grown in Perth who have not travelled overseas don't expose themselves, including employer, of internationalism. And I come from New Zealand. New Zealand and Australia should be no different.
Exactly.
And and as I said, I teach. I had no problems getting teaching work, but when it came to going back into corporate, I've had difficulties. And in fact, if I can't get into corporate, I'm looking to actually get a franchise and go public practice, get my CA or CPA, because I've got got possibility of getting CA or CPA. I'll go public practice and do my own thing. That's probably, I've actually talked to a Big Four partner over in Sydney, and one of his suggestions is, work at public practice. So that's, yeah. That's a difficulty here in Perth.
It's definitely that. And yeah, I think for myself, in my personal situation, I worked in Germany, UK, France, Belgium, and obviously their tax